And a good Wednesday morning, Quad Cities. It is Wednesday, January 22nd, 2025, and it's time for Ask Andrew Live. And look who's with me this morning.
Yes, good morning. Good morning. I made it into work in time for this.
I was just going to ask, how are the roads? How is everything outside?
Not too bad. I also got new tires, and I'm really starting to notice how nice it is to have new tires
Isn't that
going
nice?
into the winter season. So, yeah, roads aren't too bad. I definitely, no hard left turns, no hard turns in general. Just take it easy. But obviously, we've been watching the I-74 camera, and it does look like someone may have gotten into a minor accident, so that might be causing some slowdown on that bridge so far.
Yeah, gonna have to keep an eye on the roads, and I don't think it's just this morning we got to watch that. It's this afternoon too. If you're watching us during GMQC, James has issued that weather impact alert for the evening commute. The reason being is the snow this morning. It was that powdery snow because it's so cold. But we're going to warm up to near 30 this afternoon, and that's going to cause that snow to come a little bit more heavy with some water. And I imagine most of the pavement, whether it's a bridge or the ground, is probably still below freezing.
Yes, so that will cause some slick spots, especially if it's that heavy wet stuff. Then you kind of have to worry about the iciness, the black ice maybe that you can't really see on the roads. So yeah, I would definitely say the evening commute, watch out for that a little bit more. And I will also say, it was 14, 15 degrees when I walked outside this morning, and it felt way better than it's been, which is crazy as well.
I know it's something when you step outside and the temperatures are still that low, but it's like, wow, it's
not minus 20.
Not bad.
It feels like
kind of balmy. You know? So we're going to be moving in the right direction here as we go throughout today, and even next week's looking really nice too. So thank goodness for that. So we got a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about, of course, the big mess that's going on south of us, that snowstorm. You actually have some relatives that live near the coast that got snow.
Yeah, so I have my uncle, aunt, cousin, they live in Beaufort, South Carolina. It's right next to Hilton Head, and they are right on the marshland, which leads right to the ocean. So the ocean's basically their backyard, and it's crazy. Sent me some pictures, like their dock that leads out, all covered in snow. They got mainly, I was looking up totals, and I saw some early estimates around 5 inches, which I would say that's probably a ballpark about what he got. But he talked about how it was like pretty icy snow. So what happens, with those areas, it doesn't get this cold like we're experiencing here. They were just below freezing, so they get that heavy wet snow, and it starts to compact, and that also can cause it to get a bit icy. Luckily for them, though, they'll be in the 60s next week, so this isn't going to stick around long.
It's going to melt quickly, but I bet it was a shock to their system. And, we were talking yesterday about some of those areas in Texas and Louisiana. They were saying shelter in place because they have no snow plows, there's no salt. Most of them probably don't even have a shovel.
A lot of them haven't even driven in conditions like this, so it makes sense to stay at home.
And a lot of cars down there don't have all-season tires because they don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So now that it's over, the cleanup begins, and we still see some crazy pictures come in. And we saw some that you showed me from your relatives, and we're still seeing some come in even to this day. So we'll get right into it. A reminder of how this all works. There's going to be a segment coming up in just moments after we get done with what's going on across the country. And of course, I'll go over today's question too, in case you missed it this morning. But right now we're streaming live, not only on the WQAD 8+ app, which is on your smart TV, but we're also streaming on Facebook. But if you're watching us via the smart TV app, there's no way to text on that. What you do is you send us a text message at this number here. It's 309-304-0888, and you text that number. Don't call it, because if you call it, you're going to get this lovely message that says, we can't accept phone calls at this number. We can only accept texts. So 309-304-0888, 309-304-0888 is the number that you want to do. Remember, we're keeping it weather-related only. As we always say, don't make it weird. We want to keep it weather-related only. So let's talk a little bit about that storm system, where it's at right now, where it's going to be heading, and kind of the setup to all of this. And Peter Warner did a great job putting some of these pieces together yesterday with his little piece that we showed this morning. There's where the storm is, and you've got rain in Florida. You've also got some snow off the coast now of North Carolina and South Carolina. Yeah.
If you're near the ocean, you just look out and it's snowing.
Isn't that something? And you think about the water temperatures. I mean, of course, they're significantly above freezing. So that's one of the other things we noticed too with the snow that was falling along the Gulf Coast, like you showed me with those pictures. And your relatives said it was that heavy, wet, almost like kind of icy snow.
Yeah. Yeah, which again, like they were asking me, what do you think is going to happen? I said anywhere between 3 to 5 inches. That's kind of what I was thinking. But models were all over the place, and that's kind of what makes this so hard to forecast, especially in this region, because the snowfall totals are going to be so all over the place depending on how close you are to that coast. Again, I was wondering, I guess it really does depend on the winds. Luckily, this was coming in from east to west. I was wondering if the system hit it right on, would it almost turn into a lake effect snow?
Yes.
If it was a different, which could cause even higher amounts. But again, this was moving east to west and then going over to the ocean. So likely saw heavier snowfall totals just slightly inland where you didn't have that immediate impact of those water temperatures right along your area. So again, it makes it really, really difficult, but there's definitely a high concentration of different snowfall totals all over the coastlines.
Yeah, and we talked about the compaction too, that, with it being a heavier, wet, icy snow, it tends to kind of cave in on itself and compact and lower snowfall amounts unless you get right out there as it's going to measure it. Even if you let it sit for 20, 30 minutes, it starts to crush in on itself. So that was another reason we probably saw some variation in the snowfall totals. But a once-in-a-generation event for folks down there, easily. It goes to show the strength of the Arctic air that's in place. And that's kind of what Peter was explaining yesterday is, nobody is escaping this Arctic air outbreak that we're seeing. You're noticing the cold air all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, even Florida, at least the north half of the state, being impacted by the Arctic air. The polar vortex itself, if you're curious where that's located, it came awful close. It got up here to the northern Great Lakes. Reminder, the polar vortex will very rarely come overhead of us here in the Quad Cities. We get these little offshoots of the polar vortex that are coming through. So that was the perfect setup. You had that cold air, an area of low pressure, and then a cold front. All of it coming together just right in the timing and the dynamics. That's what led to the snow along the Gulf Coast. And now that system's going to be heading out. But the cold air will stick around for another day or two before the warmth comes back in. Like Morgan said, they're going to be back in the 60s in no time, and probably some 70s in the days ahead too, as this warmth continues to come up here to the north. Let's look at the snowfall season so far. How much across the entire United States? The bluer the color, the lighter the snow. Once you get into the reds and also into the purples and the pinks, that's the real heavy stuff. But you can see clearly there's a huge kind of a donut hole right here across the state of Iowa where we have hardly gotten anything at all. Reminder, I think we've only got a little over 3 inches for our snowfall so far for the season in the Quad Cities. But you look at places like Omaha and southwestern Iowa, where it's even less. So a big donut hole here, all the storm systems going to the south. That shows you where the jet stream has been. Of course, northern areas are going to get their fair share of snow. No surprise with the Great Lakes. All you need is cold air to get the snow machine cranked up there, and it works quite well. But yeah, we still have a big deficit that's lingering here in the Quad Cities, and it's something we're going to have to track in the next several weeks because there's concerns, of course, what this means for water storage when we get into the spring. Also, the fact that the frost has been allowed to get down quite deep because we have no snow covering the ground to insulate it. So there's a flood risk factor with this. And by the way, we just got the flood outlook schedule, and that's going to be coming up just a few weeks from now. We'll get the first thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at this and looking kind of at the headwaters of the Mississippi River, which is what we really look at when it does come to our spring flooding. Even then, they're not seeing as much as general, too.
No, not at all. So, if this remains the case, you're looking at spring flood factors. It's more going to rely, I think, on the spring rain pattern as opposed to the snow pattern. And that's one of the key takeaways right now. So right now, if they were to issue flood outlooks and start talking about things, the biggest concern and biggest caveat, I think, is going to be the spring rain, like you said.
Yeah, and definitely just seeing how February plays out. We know that we still have another solid month to go.
We do.
And February can bring in bitter cold. It can bring in a lot of snow.
Yeah.
Last year it was kind of an early spring, so it's just hit or miss with February especially. And March can even bring in snow. I remember one year we got 10 inches total in March. So there's still a lot of time to get some snow on the ground.
There is, yes. And there's still time for it to get closer to my prediction. So far, you're winning. Kudos to Morgan. going with the low route. That was a smart choice, by the way.
See, I didn't do any. It was quite literally just a guesstimate in terms of me being like, I don't want it. I don't want the snow, so I'm going to be the lowest person.
And
so far, I'm winning.
It has paid off
Yes.
in dividends so far. So we'll see what the rest of the season looks like. But yeah, you're right about February. It's a wild card.
Yeah.
And I remember I was a student at Blackhawk here in the Quad Cities one year, and we had a sizable snowfall in early April.
Yeah.
So, it's not over yet. I know there's a lot of negativity on social media for snow lovers because you're giving up on the season already and you're saying it's not going to happen. But I'm telling you, sometimes patience pays off.
There's a reason why Craig Hignite says gardening season, growing season doesn't start until after Mother's Day.
That's right.
Because it can still be pretty dicey.
Past history tells us that's exactly what happens. One last thing before I get to our question from today. Why have we seen so much cold this January? This is something we talked about, I think, as early as late November, maybe even early December, about how this polar vortex this year was going to be weaker than what we've seen in past years, excluding 2019, of course, because we all know what happened there. But the weaker polar vortex, remember, it becomes stretched. And what I've done is I've drawn the outline of the polar vortex as it stands right now. And you notice it's not a circle. It's kind of more like a potato. It is very, very stretched vertically. And when that happens, we get these Arctic outbreaks that come in here. And boy, have they been potent. Thankfully, we have not had a repeat of 2019, but it has certainly given us some cold days, that's for sure. So something to keep an eye on. As long as that remains weak, we're going to be vulnerable to the colder temperatures, but there are signs it's going to kind of get a little bit of a break from us here in a while, coming up in a bit. If you missed the question this morning, I'll go over that really quickly. It was from Tom in Milledgeville asking about this planetary parade.
Oh, okay.
I know we saw one last year, but there's a difference in the one this year in that we get 6 planets instead of 5.
Ooh, an extra one.
Yeah, we get an extra one. And I'm trying to contain my inner middle schooler when I mention one of these planets because it's one we don't get to talk a whole lot about. But Uranus is going to make an appearance.
We've missed it.
Yeah, I mean, how often do we get to talk about that planet? Because it's so far away, we usually don't get a good opportunity to see it. But if you have a telescope or you've got a really strong pair of binoculars, you're going to be able to potentially see this in the next couple of weeks. So this is now through the end of the month. You get 6 planets that are going to be visible at once. It's not going to look like what you're seeing here in the picture. This is just for reference. But you'll be able to see Venus, Saturn, Uranus, Jupiter, Mars, and Neptune. You want to look in the western sky immediately after sunset. The Uranus and Neptune, those will be harder to see if you don't have a telescope. But if you do, take a look. It should be a sight to see. I remember my best buddy's got one of those big, powerful telescopes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And he showed me a view of Saturn one time, and it took my breath away.
It's so cool. I've seen one
so
Saturn
cool.
through a telescope too. It's insane. Like you can see the rings. I want a telescope like that.
It is so neat.
It's awesome.
Gonna need a third job to get one.
I know.
I saw the price and I was like,
yeah.
Okay, but yeah, it is cool to see. So we have some observatories, not just locally, but in the region. So if you ever get a chance and they're having one of their open houses and they have some viewing nights, go do it.
Yeah,
it is
take
so
advantage
awesome.
of it.
Yeah, take very big advantage of that. All right, we'll start getting into your questions here, see what everybody's got for us this morning. We had some good ones last week. We were talking about like atomic bombs in the Arctic and some other stuff. Yeah, I had to do a little homework.
The cold?
Yeah.
I would say that's a horrible idea.
Isn't that horrible? I know. I'm like, anytime you're talking about bombs, I'm like, no, I'm out.
To modify weather? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Okay, so from Brandon and Moline, how unusual is it for southern states to experience significant snowfall at this time of the year? It's very unusual.
Yeah.
This coastal snowfall, extremely unusual. Now, like Atlanta, I think more so recently over the past couple of years, they'll see their fair share of some snowflakes, enough to maybe close down businesses for a day. But for it to stretch all the way across from the Gulf Coast to the eastern coastline and bring snow to that area, it's a generational storm.
It is. This is, once in a lifetime, once in a generation. I mean, we looked at the watches and warnings yesterday, the fact that Louisiana had their first ever blizzard warning ever. And it was the first, not only for the state, but it was the first blizzard warning to ever be issued along the Gulf Coast.
That just goes to show how unusual this is.
Yeah, but immediately my mind went to the thought of, is this the Day After Tomorrow movie?
Yeah.
Where, things just freeze over and nobody's safe.
Yeah.
We're evacuating to Mexico and further south. And it's like, no, that's not what's happening.
No, not at all. But very eerie because it's a similar situation.
It is. It was something.
We already answered this, but Don in Bettendorf, who is winning the snowfall predictions. It is me.
Right here.
But we got one more
same
month.
lady who caught 2 tornadoes last year, might I add.
Hey.
She is on a streak. You know, next time the Powerball comes up, you're breaking my neck.
I should. All right, Karen in Galesburg. Have any records been broken for single-day snowfall totals in the southern cities? I'd say yeah.
Yes, multiple.
Yeah.
Multiple. Everywhere from New Orleans to Lafayette to Lake Charles, even all the way down into Texas. Multiple snowfall records just broken, just obliterated.
I'm sure we'll hear a lot more about that through the day today as, you know, people are diving into the history of all this because they don't see snow often, so they really have to kind of go back and be like, okay, when was the last time it snowed? When is like, so you have to really kind of go back and find those stuff. So we'll probably learn a lot more, but I'm going to say numerous, like dozens and dozens and dozens of places.
Yeah, and one of the other things that Peter realized too when he was looking up the data yesterday is this occurred over 2 days. So you have to look at a 2-day snowfall total to see what records were broken, not just a single, not just that only. You also look at the 2-day as well. And there's a reminder too, again, of all the snow that continues to go south of us. Look at all the green numbers from Amarillo, Texas to St. Louis to Atlanta. Meanwhile, everything negative here in the Quad Cities. Just remarkable.
I know. My family in Indianapolis is sick of it.
They're like, stop.
But I was like, you guys can have it. We had 26 inches in 1 week last year.
Yeah.
So we did our time.
That's right. We've been there, done that.
We have, oh, Jessica Reinhardt says, video on her phone from a snowfall last year on April 2nd.
You know what? I think I remember that a little bit, yeah.
Don't.
I'm having a little bit of a flashback right now, yeah.
I'll have to go, I don't know. I think my brain holds on to the 15-inch in one day, and like that was it.
Yeah.
That's all my winter was last year. Oh, Larry watching from Phoenix.
Oh, hey.
He says, stay warm, Illinois.
Phoenix is a good place to be. You know, Peter Warner's from Phoenix.
Yes. Caleb in Muscatine, are we getting lots of snow today?
No, not really. I mean, just a little dusting is all we're going to see this morning. I think some snow showers coming in this afternoon. Another dusting there, though if you live along the Highway 20 corridor further north, you could see a little bit more. Our in-house model has been kind of hinting at that ever since yesterday. I'll pull it up here for you really quick, and we'll load it into the big screen. There you see kind of this corridor right here along Highway 20 where 1 or 2 of those snow showers comes in a little bit stronger. 1 inch, 2 inches at most up there along Highway 20, but the rest of us, it's just a solid dusting coming in this morning. And that's been the other remarkable thing is we have not had a big one-sitting snowfall.
We have not.
This has all been piddly little bursts of snow with these clippers.
Yeah, and honestly, a big testament to that is because this has been a pretty chilly winter so far. And cold air just, we've talked about it, it's denser, it allows for a lot of sinking air. You notice whenever we get these really cold stretches, we're nothing but sunshine during them. And that's because there's just no lift. Water content is really minimal in cold air. So it just, even when we do get systems that interact with this cold air, it just really cannot squeeze out that much moisture. So we just get these small little snowfalls like we've been seeing.
Yeah, we want, you know, we want some warm air. We don't want a ton of it, but we want at least temperatures that are in the upper 20s, low 30s to be able to squeeze in a little bit more moisture, but we just haven't been able to do that so far.
Laura says we had some wet snow this morning in Rock Falls and then it was dry.
Interesting, so wet to start and then dry.
Yeah.
Especially considering temperatures this morning were right around 10, 12.
Very cold.
Unless, I don't know, if it was on the pavement, I'm guessing it may have hit.
Maybe if it was treatments.
Some of the brine, maybe that's still on the road. But yeah, should have been powdery for the most part this morning.
Larry says, is it going to snow today? We're going to still see some light snow.
You can see the next round there in northern Iowa. That'll be
too much
here. Yeah, not a whole lot.
Doug from Sterling, are there any unique challenges southern states face during winter storms? Seems like everything stops when it snows down south, and it absolutely does.
Yeah.
And that's because they're not equipped with plows. They're not equipped with salt. They're not equipped with all of these things that we have because we see snow regularly. We know it's going to come. It's been years since these areas have seen snow, so why would they spend all this money to have plows sitting when they're not going to be used? So they just don't have the capacity to cover or to really clean this off quickly. So it really does kind of shut down those areas.
I mean, it doesn't take much. We laugh because we're like, oh, stay in place or a shelter in place for 3 inches of snow. And for that, that's a walk in the park for us. We can handle that. At least most of us can. There's a couple though that we see every day that drive a little crazy that can't. But
yeah, and then also these people, they don't know how to drive in snow. It's like that. It's not anything against them. I'm sure there's plenty of people who probably grew up in the Midwest and are used to it. But some people quite literally have never had this experience, and a lot of them. So it's quite dangerous if you're going to put those people in that scenario where they're uncomfortable, they don't know how to do it. It just is smarter in that sense to truly just stay home, because also with these southern states, they're going to get warmer here in the next couple of days. The snow is probably going to be completely gone once we get past the weekend, and
it's a whole nother environment down there. It really is, unless they have some people living there that are fortunate enough to have grown up here maybe, and then they've transplanted farther south, they can deal with it. But yeah, for the rest of them, it's just not worth it. It's not worth the expense. It's not worth the emergency response. Everything involved. It's just better, like you said, to just shut it down and wait for it to melt in a day or two.
Tyler says, is there a certain track where the jet stream would have to be located in order to get a good snowfall?
There is, yes. There's a couple of storm tracks that we want to see, and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago too. I'm going to see if I can find my little graphic in here somewhere. There it is, winter storm tracks. So there's 2 of them that we look at. This is the most popular one, the most favored one, that we call it a panhandle hook, and that's the one that comes up from the southwest. We have not, I don't think, seen anything in that direction.
We haven't gotten this one to get into our area. More so, it's shifted itself south, kind of hit that Kansas, Missouri, southern Illinois, Indiana. So like this system basically happened just south of us, where they experienced that big snowfall of 6 to 10 inches. If that was any farther north, that would have been exactly what we experienced. And again, these systems bring us the best chance for heaviest snow is because it's south. So it's dragging in a lot more warm air and moisture along with it for us to use.
Yeah, that one system you were referencing was interesting because it didn't take its usual curve to the north. It kind of went straight west to east.
Yeah, it did.
And that's very unusual. So it took quite an interesting jet stream pattern to do that. But yeah, this is the one you want for big snows. Now there's another one, and this has been the kind that we have been seeing for weeks now, but we have not seen one that's been very strong, these Alberta clippers. Most of them, it's light snowfall amounts, but you can get these hybrid Alberta clippers that go nuts with the cold air and extra moisture, extra energy, and some of those can even produce up to a foot of snow, but we haven't had it yet.
Yeah, and again, it really just depends on the pattern that you're experiencing with these clipper systems. Again, we've just been so cold, so there's just no energy for these clippers to be able to build upon. But if we were able to get a stretch of just some warmer air and we had some moisture, and then all of a sudden we see that huge cold front come through, and then right behind a clipper system, that could bring in that heavier snowfall with it. But it just really, it takes those perfect conditions for us to be able to see that.
Yeah, and it just seems for some reason this year it's harder and harder to get those things to line up perfectly. We're not done yet though.
I'm not complaining. Tim from Moline, have we seen the last polar vortex for the rest of the year, and is it uncommon to see more in February?
I don't think this is the last one we're going to see, because there's still plenty of time for more cold air to sneak its way in here. I can tell you the long range, when we did the 14-day outlook this morning, did trend temperatures more in the 40s and 30s as we head into that first week or first couple of days into February. But I don't think we're done in terms of dealing with, those little offshoots of the polar vortex. Will it get as cold as it just did? Probably not. Yeah. The sun's getting stronger now.
I was going to say, once we get to, so this month is the coldest month of the year.
Yes.
So we're going to actually start to see our average temperatures begin to increase as we head into February. With that, that's just a testament to, again, the sun is getting a little bit stronger. The days are getting a little bit longer. We just generally do start to see a little bit more warmth into February. But then again, like Andrew said, maybe we're not going to get, 0 and below, but we could definitely get into the single digits, maybe the teens, again into February. So still could be expected to be seeing some cold, but when it comes to this extreme cold, likely not going to see much of this again, especially with how the next 2 weeks are trending. We're getting back into the 30s and 40s. We just don't see another kind of big cool down in that period.
Yeah, the clock in terms of the sun's weakest period, it's ticking down very quickly this time of year. I had a graphic in here somewhere that showed the amount of thermal energy that the sun will send in.
The BTUs?
Was it the BTU? Maybe I named it BTU.
I think you did.
Did I name it that way?
No.
How about energy?
What about solar?
Maybe it was solar. It was such a good graph.
It was.
If need be,
I know exactly.
There it is.
There it
You're
is.
so good. Oh my gosh, what would I do without her? I think I would be in a corner crying in the fetal position. That's what I would be doing. Yeah, this is the graphic that I wanted to show you, the difference in the sun's energy. So BTU, if you've ever had to replace your furnace in your home, that probably sounds familiar. That's the measure of heat energy that's used in this country, and even in overseas too, by the way. What it is the higher the number, the more energy the sun is bringing in. And right now, we're climbing. December is the lowest at only 432 BTUs. But look at that. We've gone up 100 here for January, and next month, we go up even more than that at 800. And look at March.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Really start to climb. So yeah, again, that's kind of just showing that we might not get super, super, super cold again, but still could definitely see those outbursts of the weaker polar vortex and bring in some chilly air in February. But again, it's something to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. I love that.
Yeah.
Really digging into the science there.
From Teresa and Clinton, how does the time of day affect snow accumulation and road conditions?
Very good question. So if you've got, say, I would say an early morning snow event, I think that's a little bit more impactful than a later day snow event because, of course, you're dealing with the coldest part of the day. The pavement's had a chance to cool down. The ground has had a chance to cool down.
People are rushing to work.
People are rushing to work. Exactly, yeah. Whereas the daytime, things have warmed up a little bit in most cases. Even if you have some sunshine, that helps warm the ground and the pavement up. So really, it's the overnight events and into the early morning, I think, that are the most gangbusters when it comes to maximizing that potential.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
Yeah.
Kelly in Rock Falls asks, it has been a long time since the ozone layer has made the news. Can you speak to the change of weather patterns in relation to the status of the upper stratosphere?
Yeah, we don't really hear about the ozone layer.
Because the
a whole
ozone
lot.
layer has, I don't think it's virtually fixed itself yet, but it's close. And the reason why it was so in the news, in your face, is because of the aerosols and the refrigerants and I forget what it's called, CPCs?
Oh, CFCs.
CFCs.
Yeah, CFCs.
CFCs, which were in refrigerants a long time ago, which again releases into the atmosphere, and we discovered that that breaks down the good ozone, and it started to create a hole in the ozone layer, which then in turn allows bad UV rays to come in and all that stuff. So then when they banned the CFCs, it was kind of a slow and steady return to normal. So it's virtually almost, I think, healed itself, which is good news, but that's kind of why we don't really talk about the ozone layer anymore, because we got rid of the thing that we did to destroy it.
to cause that massive hole to develop. And I agree. Last I heard, the ozone layer was healing. Things were looking better. I know it's a long process. You're talking about something that spans thousands of square miles. So this is not going to be an overnight or a year or even probably a 5-year thing, but it is heading in the right direction.
Yeah, I've definitely heard some positive things, but that's kind of why you don't really hear much about it anymore. Maybe when scientists call it officially healed, maybe we'll talk about it again, or if it starts to deteriorate again. But so far, no news is good news for the ozone layer.
Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, if we're not hearing about it, then there's usually not much to worry about.
Oh, we're getting a couple more last questions.
Yeah, we got a couple minutes left.
Linnell's just saying Highway 20 driving to Galena was fun, about 50% snow and ice covered.
Highway 20 is the worst. I remember that from my Rockford days. Just a dusting of snow. It's a mess.
Allison in Rock Island, does a thick blanket of snow really help insulate the ground and plants from the cold air? It does.
Yeah.
Because if you think about it, snow and ice is basically virtually holding itself at 32-ish degrees, right at freezing. So if you put that on top of the ground, basically under the ground is going to be insulated, but what happens above the ground is we kind of get the effects of that cold to mix in with the air, and it can make above ground actually colder or feel colder. And that's something that we call albedo too, because the surface is highly, highly reflective. And it just doesn't allow any of that solar energy to get to the ground, but then in turn, again, the ground is being insulated by that snow.
Yes, and that's a really good example of that. And we've been talking a little bit about the frost depth, on how deep in the ground the frost has gone. We were expecting that number to go up because we didn't have the snowpack. The ground is fully exposed to these Arctic temperatures. And you remember when I talked about it last week, it was at 4 inches. Well, now I just looked at the map now. Here in Davenport, the frost depth is at 6 inches. So we've gained 2 inches now of frost depth just because of this cold.
Yeah, and if we had snow on the ground, we probably wouldn't see that jump.
No.
So it really does help insulate and protect some of those plants in the ground.
It really does.
Okay, last question, Linnell says, is the snow going to let up?
This morning, yes, you're going to see a little break in it. I'll pull up the radar really quickly before we get out of here with this last question. Just to show you what's coming through, let's go to the wide view. Let that load up for a second and see what's left of what's coming through. Yeah, there's a couple more, looks like, lingering to the back west of Cedar Rapids.
Shouldn't be anything too heavy.
Yeah,
it's
really light.
fairly light.
Very, very light. And beyond that, a couple more snow showers this afternoon and this evening. Yeah, you're in the prime spot there, being in Joe Davis County, yeah, where you could see that 1 to 2 inch accumulation with the evening stuff. But other than that, about another hour or two of some snow, then a break, and then some more snow later this afternoon for you up there.
Yep. It's winter.
It is. Welcome to January.
Yeah.
We've got everybody, right?
Yep.
All caught up?
Yep.
All right. Very good. We've got to get going to a meeting, discuss the news and events of what's going to be happening, of course, coming up later today. We have GMQC at 11. I'll see you there. And don't forget to join us every Wednesday. We'll be right here answering your questions for Ask Andrew Live. If we missed it, you have more opportunities. Go to WQ80.com, hit the weather tab, Ask Andrew, submit your question there. And don't forget, we also do it on Mondays and Wednesdays.
Yeah.
GMQC at 5 and 6.
We're a wealth of knowledge.
We are. Use us to your advantage. Take advantage of that. All right, you guys enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. We'll see you later.
Continue with us and watch free now on the 8 Plus app everywhere you stream.